So this video is gonna be about Sweden, and the video is called 19 Weird Things Swedish People Do That You Should Do Too. That's what caught my attention is I seen you should in 19 weird, and I was like, that makes no sense. 19 weird things. So they're gonna be like things that we don't normally do as Americans. Um, that's weird, but we should do it. So let's check that out.
From how we cut our pizza to how. Hey everyone! I hope you are doing amazingly. Today I'm going to share the craziest, most wonderful, and best Swedish traditions that I think you should try too. From how we cut our pizza to how we raise our children to how we sleep, here are some of my favorite Swedish traditions that I think everyone in the whole entire world should do. So let's get started.
19. I'm gonna guess I do at least 8 of them. Just gonna take a stab at it.
We cut our pizza with scissors. This is also a minimalist hack because you no longer need to use a silly pizza cutter that you literally cannot use for anything. Instead, just use your kitchen scissors to cut pizza. Cutting pizza is such an easy and fun way to slice pizza.
That's so funny because when I can't find the pizza cutter, I do use scissors and I get made fun of for that. So, uh, I guess if you wanted to be minimalistic, you could you could do it that way instead of having to invest in a pizza cutter.
One of my favorite hacks for a happy marriage and a Swedish tradition that I grew up with is to have separate duvets. Having separate duvets makes so much more
Duvet.
sense.
What is
It
that?
is so much more comfortable. You never have to fight with your partner over a blanket, and it just makes a world of difference. If you have one duvet, it's big and bulky and it's crazy. Just try two duvets and see if it makes you feel any better. Speaking of duvets and
So, I mean, I kind of don't get it. So, two, why don't they just get one big bed and then have separate sheets or blankets? It looks like just one big bed. Why get two unless just so you know, like the maybe that's a good idea. Charlie, he takes up more than half the bed. He says I take up more than half the bed. That would solve our problems.
bedding, the next thing that is really important that you should try that we all do in Sweden is that we have a duvet cover and a duvet inner and a sheet to make our bed. We don't have any top sheets, we don't have any blankets. That is absolutely disgusting. Sorry, but it is because you don't really wash them as often. You need to have a duvet if it's cold in your country, and you need to put the duvet inside of the duvet cover, and then you wash the duvet cover weekly, and this way you have a very clean bed. When I first came to New Zealand, I
Good
was
idea.
taught about the idea of a top sheet, and you sort of put the duvet on top, but you never really encase it. But that means that when you move around throughout the bed, your body will touch the duvet inner, and you simply cannot wash that once a week because it doesn't
Oh, wait a minute. So a duvet is like the sheets, not the bed. I have no idea.
last as long as if you do that. So absolutely, if you have a duvet inner and it's cold in your
Okay.
country, put a duvet outer on it. And in the summer, when it's too warm, you just put the duvet inner away and you just sleep with the duvet outer as a blanket. Easy.
Awesome.
One of my favorite Swedish sayings is something like, "There is no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing." Very literal, very
Uh, the people in ne- Netherlands say that too.
Swedish, but as a child, this was normally printed on our weekly mailer at kindergarten or at school, which basically meant for our parents to remember to put proper clothing on us because we would be outside all day, no matter the weather. I think most people these days tend to stay inside.
See, that's we don't do that. They yeah, all throughout school, and I don't think they really do it now. But that'd be a good. We are pansies. Americans are pansies. Um, and it's all of our fault. So
when it's bad weather outside instead of just going out there. But by putting on proper clothing, it makes it so much easier to be outside in all weathers, and it's so much better for your health to be outside and breathe in the microbiome rather than just staying inside and watching TV. Another Swedish health.
So, what would be a good outfit to wear when you need to walk down the street or down the sidewalk? Um, like a raincoat, the plastic ones, I still feel like you would still get pretty wet. And then like what about like puddles in your shoes? It's impossible not to get your shoes wet. So I'm really curious how you guys do it. Make sure you put it down in the comments. Um I'm excited.
Health hack for you guys. One of the things that I didn't think was weird, but that became obvious to me the moment I moved abroad, was the fact that we don't talk about race. The first time I heard the word Caucasian, I was 20 and living in Japan, and before that I had never heard any of these words, and it's just not something we talk about. Which brings me on to the next point, is that you never have to disclose this information if you, for example, go to the bank or going to the university. And that information is absolutely not necessary for the bank to know when I'm opening my bank account, and frankly, it's ridiculous. So do what the Swedish people do, I guess.
Yeah, exactly that. I know they asked the race for everything. For everything. Um Loans, they ask at the bank, they ask any application you're filling out, application, um getting your driver's license, uh literally everything. And I've never understood that at all. Like why they would need to know that. It's just it doesn't make any sense really.
Whilst we're speaking about politically sensitive subjects, let's speak about children. In Sweden, we treat our children with respect and we treat them as already humans, which is something I really enjoy and I think everyone should do. Kids don't have to address older people in a certain way. Kids don't really have to act in a certain way. Kids are really allowed to be kids, which means they're allowed to make mistakes, they're allowed to be upset, they don't have to hug someone if they don't want to, they don't have to kiss someone if they don't want to. Just completely reasonable things that I think every country should adopt. Kids are the best thing in the world, so I absolutely think we should treat kids with the utmost respect. Now, this
Yes.
one, I don't know if it's for all of Sweden, but it's definitely something I've experienced a lot of times. But that is people, when I get invited to dinner parties, people ask me, is there something you don't eat? My goodness, this has saved so much trouble having a dinner party or going to a dinner party. I normally tell my best friend when I go to dinners at hers that I don't eat coriander or cilantro because I really don't like it.
Cilantro. I've never ever heard it be called that. We always call it cilantro, so that's a little bit different. But yeah, so that's kind of a regular thing here too, only because so many people apparently are allergic to all these things, and they have gluten allergies and things like that. So yeah, we do ask like, hey, do you have a gluten allergy, a peanut allergy, um, things like that. But other than that, we don't really get what you get. Um, you know, you usually know what they're serving before you go too, so kind of have the idea of like what you're able to eat. So yeah.
And it makes it a lot easier. One of the most important Swedish traditions is being whole and clean. Now, what does this mean? This is a deeply rooted tradition that goes so far back in Swedish history, but ultimately it means to always present yourself as best as you possibly can. Every time we had friends over, my family would just massively clean the entire house, not because it was necessarily dirty, but it's so important to uphold the standard of being whole and clean in Swedish society. Another
Oh,
thing that I think is crazy that other countries have and that we don't have is that we don't really use the expression from scratch. Growing
so I will say real quick, Charlie's not so much like this, but like if his family's coming over, I would like to pick up the house. pick up the toys and, maybe straighten up a little bit. He don't care. He's like, oh, she don't care. Just come on over. Um, and she's not judgy. She don't care, and she wouldn't judge us if it was a mess. But um, yeah, it's just like it's just weird. Like, yeah, I know they don't care, but I do. Um, and so yeah, that's a big difference between us.
Growing up, I didn't know that you could buy cake mixes. I had only seen it on TV. I had never really heard of it. I didn't know you could buy any sort of pre-made food or something that we call halvfabrikat, which technically means half processed foods. Of course, this might differ a little bit, but in general, we don't say that we make things from scratch in Sweden. If you make a cake, you will make it from scratch. That is just how you make a cake. There's no other way to make a cake. You either buy it from the bakery or you make it from scratch. And I think that's also one of the reasons why we are quite a healthy country. One of the best Swedish.
I agree with that completely. I don't know of anybody that bakes cakes. They would just rather go to the store and buy it themselves. And they believe it's worth it because time, and we don't got much of it. So having that option to be able to just buy a cake is nice. It is nice. But I get what she's saying. Americans are lazy.
Culture traditions that you've probably already heard about is Fika. A fika is when you have a coffee, normally, or a tea, with a sweet treat, and you normally have it in the afternoon, but you can actually have it whenever. And this is one of the most common things we do when we go on dates or meet up with our friends. It's so cozy, it's really fun, but I also really like that it's one of the few things in Sweden where you can date someone or meet someone without drinking alcohol. Now, fika means different things in different languages, especially in Italian, so I would use it with caution and use it only when you're in Sweden. Going back.
That is a big thing. Drinking. If you're able to drink, I don't drink. Charlie doesn't drink. Uh, but it is something that is widely accepted to have anytime, anywhere. So that sucks, but
Back to childcare, another thing that I really appreciate about Swedish culture that you should try if you have children is co-sleeping. My parents co-slept with me and my brother. Everyone I know, I think, co-slept. My sister co-slept with me or with her parents when she was with them. And I've never ever had any issues, heard any issues, or hear anyone talk badly about co-sleeping. Co-sleeping with your baby makes so much more sense because you don't have to wake up in the middle of the night and go into another room. Also, your baby's brain is not developed enough to know that you're not in the room, which makes it feel unsafe. Co-sleeping is literally the best option for sleeping with your baby. My dad built this really clever little half crib that he put next to the bed with a mattress and
I had one of those, and that is awesome. Absolutely awesome. Now, co-parenting is widely like unacceptable here, and the reason for that is if your baby's little, um, and say you're just holding them in the middle of the night, the baby could easily fall off the bed, or which yeah, you could put them in the middle, but there's just always the option of like, or always that, uh, there's always that possibility of maybe rolling on your baby and suffocating it. Uh, and that's happened a lot here, a lot, a lot. And if it doesn't happen in other countries, I would be that would be weird to me. Is why. Uh,
level to the bed. So I could be in the bed, co sleeping there at the same time as my mom was in the bed. Co sleeping shouldn't be a term, I don't think. It shouldn't be a trend. It shouldn't be an idea. It should just be the most common way for sleeping with your.
so and also, so in relationships, how do y'all have intimate time if your kids are in bed with you? Let me know down in the comments.
baby. Another thing that is common in Sweden that isn't very common abroad is that both men and women call themselves feminists. In Sweden, people are generally more educated about feminism than in other countries, and I really like that we use the word more casually and without so much attachment to it that comes from other countries. A weird thing about Sweden that I thought was a bit very quite strange is that our school is a lot easier than any other school in the world. Now, I don't know exactly how accurate this is, but I know that in general in Sweden we are very educated. However, our school, especially I think middle school and preschool, is a lot easier than, for example, in England or in New Zealand. We have way less assignments, way less homework, but somehow it still works. Unfortunately, this trend is changing and we're becoming a bit more like the rest of the world, but I really think homework is ridiculous and we shouldn't have it.
I agree with that because they already go to school 8 hours a day, and then they come home and have 3 hours of homework. They're working an 11-hour shift right there on top of if they're in sports. My son is in sports, so he has it to where he almost plays sports all year round. He don't get home till like 7 o'clock, and then he would have to eat, shower, do all that stuff. And then if he has homework, he gets behind. He does get behind. Bless his little heart.
So that's that. One weird thing we do in Sweden that I think we shouldn't do, so disregard this one, is that we don't really date. Although I'm Swedish, I've never dated a Swedish guy because I think I've only had two Swedish guys ever hit on me in my entire life. But in general, we don't really date. We don't really have a period of dating where you can see other people, or normally you're just sort of not together and then you're sort of together. Dating in Sweden is very weird. That is why I've been so unsuccessful at it. And yeah, I find it a bit uncomfortable. And I think Sweden, in fact, should adopt how people date in other countries because I think it makes way more sense and it's a much more adult way of dating. Something we do in Sweden is that we learn English very early. This also makes so much sense because it's easier to learn a language when you're young. And voila, most people speak English, which is such a useful skill to have if you want to live in another country or have any job where you don't work in Sweden. All right.
They don't teach us another language. Um, they do. I guess I shouldn't say they don't. Absolutely don't. But we don't start learning a second language until we get in high school, and with that, it's only like 4 years of uh learning it, which you'd think is a lot, but when you break it down into like how long they have work in the classroom, and when you break it down, it's really not that much. And so it is. I feel like it is a lot more difficult to try to learn a second language because I am trying to learn a second language, and it is hard, but I just baby steps. I'm getting there, but uh yeah, so that puts us at a really, really big disadvantage. They say that because, for instance, when I worked a lot of factory jobs, I don't think that there was one job that I had that um, I wasn't trained by somebody that mainly speaks Spanish but speaks a little English. And so you can't understand them, which that's not, it's the truth. And it just really sucked. I felt like it felt like foreign. I felt like a foreign kid in another country. Um, yeah, I'll move on, guys.
Useful skill to have if you want to live in another country or have any job where you don't work in Sweden. All right, so we're going even more political. Time for religion. One thing we don't do in Sweden is we're not really religious or go to church, even though Wikipedia might say otherwise. So this has changed since then, but when I grew up and my entire generation, we couldn't choose to be enrolled in the Swedish church system. That just happened automatically when we were born, no matter if we were baptized or not. We just went straight into the Swedish church system,
Okay.
which is also the system you have to be in if you want to be buried in a churchyard or if you want to be married in a church, if you want to get baptized in a church, etc., etc. So this is a quite fun fact compared to other countries, because if you look at Wikipedia, it says most Swedish people are religious, but that's simply because we are enrolled in church. Now, say what you want about religion, but I, for one, am a person who thinks that we should practice what we preach. And since most people have lots of sex before marriage, drink a ridiculous amount of alcohol, and do all other sorts of gluttonous things, I think it makes complete sense that most people don't go to church. I remember going to church in kindergarten for our summer ending, and I remember my priest had leather pants and played a rock and roll guitar, which we all thought was very, very fun. We are a land of wonderful and quirky, weird, strange traditions. In Sweden, we have something called jantelagen, which practically means be humble, but also never talk well about yourself. So
Okay.
there are pros and cons about this law as an unwritten law, but one of the good things about it is that Swedish people are in general very comfortable and quiet, or maybe better is to say not loud people. So it's very nice to be around Swedish people. No one ever yells, no one ever tries to really be the center of attention, no one really, speaks really loudly. One of my favorite things we do in Sweden, which does
That sounds like my kind of place.
not work in English, is that we don't really have a word for please. Now you can use snälla, which means like most kindly or can you kindly,
Man.
or you can use tack, which means thank you, but we don't really have a word for please. I love learning languages because this is those little parts about a language and a culture that you won't really learn unless you know the language. So I love speaking English, I love using the word please. But I also love speaking Swedish and being able to sneak in a tack or a snälla where Swedish people normally don't and sound like the most friendly and polite person in the world. So it's a win-win. So, okay, my
Cool.
friends, I did not think we'd go this political. I have written this video down. It's very funny because when I translate these very regular Swedish ideas to English, they suddenly become so much more political. Swedish people are generally extremely nice, and it's such a nice culture to live in, and I think that's why so many people move back to Sweden when they want to have a family, because it's such a safe and reasonable and wholesome place for kids to grow up. And part of that is because these lovely and quirky ideas that we have. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I had so much fun speaking about my Swedish traditions, especially since I'm not in Sweden anymore. It makes me so happy to be able to share something of how I grew up with the rest of the world, especially the useful parts. Let me know in the comments below if you have any specific traditions to your home country that you think are really valuable for everyone.
Right
And like this
on.
video if you like this type of content, and because it really helps the channel. And thank you.
Yes, it does help the channel. So please like our videos. Um yeah, so very interesting. I don't consider a lot of those weird per se. And they do sound like really wholesome people. I like that. Um Probably my favorite thing, their tradition that I like the most. Well, I really did like the bed thingy, the sheets on the bed, uh, and the cake thing. That's kind of humorous, and I'll probably be telling a few people about that. But um, what about you guys? So, do you guys have any weird or quirky or just bizarre, maybe fun ways, and traditions that you guys have? Put it down in the comments below. I'd love to hear about it, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye, guys.